There's a member of the royal family who's done more royal engagements than anyone else, year after year, without complaint, who's worked tirelessly for decades without seeking attention or creating drama, who represents what people wish the entire royal family could be: dedicated, straightforward, and utterly no-nonsense. That's Princess Anne. And then there's her brother Andrew. Hello viewers, before we dive into this fascinating news of princes and feelings towards Andrew, please take a moment and subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Your support allows us to update you with more fascinating news from the British monarchy. For years, royal watchers have wondered what Anne really thinks about the Andrew situation. She's famously discreet, fiercely private, and loyal to family. But recent revelations have exposed her true feelings, and they're not what you might expect from a sister. What's emerged is a portrait of someone who values integrity over blood, who believes in consequences over protection, and who represents a completely different approach to accountability than we've seen from the rest of the Windsor family. Today, we're diving into what Princess Anne really thinks about Andrew, and why her perspective matters far beyond one family's drama. Let's start by understanding just how different these two siblings are, because the contrast is staggering. Princess Anne is the definition of work ethic. She regularly completes over 500 royal engagements a year, more than any other royal. She's patron of over 300 charities. She was the first royal to compete in the Olympics. She's raised two children who've largely stayed out of tabloid drama. When she does interviews, they're substantive, thoughtful, and completely devoid of self-pity. And doesn't do PR stunts. She doesn't seek sympathy. She doesn't make excuses. She just does the work. Prince Andrew? Well, we know his story. The York marriage that imploded publicly. The business dealings that raised eyebrows. The friendships that became toxic. The allegations that destroyed his reputation. The interview that became a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis. Where Anne represents duty, Andrew represents entitlement. Where Anne deflects attention, Andrew sought it. Where Anne built credibility through decades of consistent service, Andrew destroyed his in a spectacular series of poor choices. They're both the Queen's children. They were both raised with the same privileges, the same education, the same understanding of royal responsibility. But they couldn't have turned out more differently. And here's what's fascinating. For years, Anne maintained the family party line. She didn't publicly comment on Andrew's situation. She appeared at family events where he was present. She maintained the appearance of unity. But behind closed doors, a very different story was unfolding. So what exactly has been exposed about Anne's true feelings? According to multiple royal sources, and this is where it gets interesting because these sources have proven credible on other matters, Princess Anne was one of the strongest voices pushing for Andrew to face real consequences. When the Epstein allegations first gained serious traction, and reportedly argued that Andrew needed to cooperate fully with American investigators, not hide behind royal privilege, not rely on expensive lawyers to craft careful statements, actually cooperate with the truth-finding process. When Andrew wanted to do the Newsnight interview and was reportedly against it, she apparently saw it for what it was, a disaster waiting to happen. She understood that Andrew's judgment was compromised, that he was incapable of the kind of honest self-reflection the situation demanded. After the interview aired and became a PR catastrophe, and was reportedly one of the voices saying Andrew needed to step back completely from public life. Not a temporary break, not a let this blow over strategy, a permanent withdrawal. And here's the most telling detail. When discussions were happening about Andrew retaining some of his military titles and patronages, and reportedly said no, absolutely not. If he can't do the work and represent the institution with integrity, he doesn't get to keep the honors. This wasn't about punishing her brother. It was about principle. The military titles, the patronages, the honors, these aren't gifts or participation trophies. They represent commitment to service. Andrew could no longer credibly represent that commitment. Anne's position was reportedly simple. Actions have consequences, even for princes. Now you might be thinking, okay, so one royal thinks Andrew should face consequences. Why does this matter? It matters because of who and is within the royal ecosystem. She's not a reformer or a rebel. She's not trying to modernize the monarchy or challenge tradition. She's the ultimate institutionalist. This is a sophisticated understanding of accountability that many families, royal or otherwise, struggle with. We confuse loyalty with unconditional support. We think loving someone means defending them regardless of what they've done, and apparently understands that real loyalty sometimes means saying, "I love you, but you've crossed a line, and there need to be consequences." There are also reports that Anne's relationship with Andrew had already been strained before the Epstein scandal, and reportedly found Andrew's lifestyle excessive, his work ethic lacking, and his judgment questionable long before the public did. So when the allegations emerged, it confirmed what Anne had apparently observed for years. Andrew felt entitled to privileges without putting in the work, believed rules didn't apply to him, and made decisions based on what benefited him rather than what served the institution. For someone like Anne, who's dedicated her life to serving that institution, watching her brother damage it through selfishness and poor judgment must have been infuriating. Here's what Anne's stance teaches us, and why this matters beyond one family. First, integrity requires consistency. You can't have different standards for people you love versus people you don't know. If you believe in accountability, it has to apply to everyone, including and especially family. Second, real loyalty sometimes looks like tough love. Anne's position wasn't anti-Andrew. It was pro-institution and pro-truth. She understood that protecting him from consequences would ultimately hurt everyone, including him. Third, credibility is earned through behavior, not birth, and has credibility when she speaks about royal duty because she's lived it. Andrew lost credibility because his behavior contradicted his position. You can't claim to represent service while living for privilege. Fourth, work ethic matters more than talent or status. Anne isn't the most charismatic royal. She's not the most glamorous. She's not the most media savvy. But she shows up, does the work, and earns respect the old-fashioned way. That's worth more than any title. Think about your own life. We all know people like Andrew, talented, privileged, charming when they want to be, but ultimately unreliable because they've never had to face real consequences. They skate by on potential rather than performance. And we all know people like, and maybe not as flashy, maybe not as exciting, but absolutely solid. The people who show up when they say they will, who do what they commit to, who don't make excuses. Which one would you rather work with? Which one would you rather be? Princess Anne has become a fascinating figure in modern royal watching precisely because she represents what the monarchy claims to be about: service. Not glamour, not celebrity, not wealth or privilege for their own sake. Service. When the Queen said, "I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service," and is one of the few royals who's actually lived that commitment. She's never sought the limelight, but she's always done the work. She's never complained about the constraints of royal life, but she's been honest about its challenges. She's never pretended to be perfect, but she's been consistent in her values. And when her brother violated those values, when he put personal relationships and financial considerations ahead of duty, when he damaged the institution they both serve, when he refused to take responsibility for his choices, and reportedly said, "Enough." That's not coldness. That's not cruelty. That's understanding that some things are bigger than family comfort. The monarchy is an institution that exists to serve the public. When someone in that institution betrays that purpose, protecting them betrays the public, and apparently understood that equation better than most of her family. There's something deeply relatable about this, even for those of us who aren't royal. We've all faced situations where someone we love has done something wrong. We've all had to choose between comfortable loyalty and uncomfortable integrity. Anne's choice, at least according to these reports, was integrity, and she made it knowing it would create family tension, knowing it would be difficult, knowing it might change her relationship with her brother forever. So where does this leave the relationship between Anne and Andrew now? Reports suggest they're civil but distant. They appear at the same family events when necessary, but there's no warmth there, no alliance, no special bond, and has apparently made peace with this. She's not losing sleep over whether Andrew feels supported by her. She's focused on doing her job, supporting the king, and representing the monarchy with the same steadfast dedication she's shown for decades. Andrew, meanwhile, has Sarah and his daughters in his corner. He's found the unconditional support elsewhere that he didn't get from Anne. And honestly, that's probably for the best. Andrew doesn't need someone else telling him he's misunderstood or defending his judgment. He needs to reckon with what he's done. And refusing to enable that avoidance might be the most loving thing she could do, even if it doesn't feel that way. There's a saying, don't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And apparently understands that protecting Andrew from consequences would have required sacrificing her own integrity and the institution she serves. She wasn't willing to make that sacrifice. Princess Anne's true feelings about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor expose more than just sibling rivalry or family tension. They expose two completely different approaches to responsibility, consequence, and what it means to serve something larger than yourself, and represents the person we should all aspire to be: consistent, hardworking, principled, and willing to make difficult choices when values are on the line. Andrew represents the cautionary tale. What happens when privilege replaces work ethic, when excuses replace accountability, and when you believe your status exempts you from the rules everyone else follows? The fact that they're siblings from the same family, with the same advantages, makes the contrast even more powerful. They had the same opportunities. They made different choices. Those choices led to vastly different outcomes. For those of you in your 20s and 30s, pay attention to this dynamic. The Andrews of the world might seem to have it easier in the short term. They charm their way through. They avoid consequences. They always seem to land on their feet. But long term, the Annis win. Integrity compounds. Consistency compounds. Work ethic compounds. And when the moment of reckoning comes, and it always comes, you want to be the person who earned their reputation rather than the one who's losing it.